Who keeps the memory of anger when grief is no longer safe to speak? Who takes whispered hatred stretched across generations and folds it into metal, hides it beneath the floor so no one ever finds it, fully unbroken? And when that hatred is carved in a dead language and pressed into the cracks between shrines and drains, and sealed not with wax but with spit, who decides what it means? There are tablets buried beneath Roman baths, and in cisterns so old they outlive the wells above them. They are thin, heavy, and cold, coded in words no priest dares translate. They are curses, and there were those who wrote them for money, not openly, not proudly, but precisely, faithfully, stylus to lead, named to silence. These were not witches, nor prophets, nor poets. They were recorders of rage, paid in candles and bread crust, tasked with folding private vengeance into something the gods could not ignore or decode. They worked in corners no fire reached. They were hired to write harm, but what they documented was forgetting. In this story, we will descend into their chamber. We will place our hands on cooled scripts, half melted. We will listen to the bone-deep creak of curses that never reached their targets. And we will learn what it meant to live not as the cursed, but as the one who folded the name. Prepare to enter their silence. If you're ready to step underground, if you're still listening, then keep following the thread and subscribe. The lead is already warm. Now we begin. The stone walls sweat when no one watches. Not from rain, nor spring mist, nor the breath of passers-by, but from the trapped memory of heat long extinguished, mingled with the cool iron perfume of things unspoken. They call it the sealed place now. No inscription bears the name, but every woman who fetches water from the public spring half a mile east points to the weed-clotted drain and warns her daughter not to retrieve coins from its rusted mouth. The Roman magistrate passed judgment 3 winters ago, but the taberna underneath the baths still draws breath. Old heat, kiln-fired, where torches once hissed and men whispered over melting wax. The chamber is a room, if it can be called that, built not for gathering but for weight. Above it, brick-clay arches counterbalance one another without mortar, and below, the floor slopes toward the black gut of an abandoned well. There are no seats, no walls for hanging lamps, no ledge upon which to set a scroll or carving slate. If something is said here, it is meant to be carried downward. In this damp hush, surrounded by tools with no fixed name, a curse writer begins his evening work. He is neither priest nor scribe nor merchant, though each of those names has, in different provinces, been pressed upon someone like him. His fingers are scorched pale, seamed with the thin memory of combs dipped in lamp oil. His nails are cracked not with age, but use. Lead, when filed daily and coiled slowly, shaves into curling strips like frozen flour dough. It leaves behind a sour warmth in the air, especially when folded around names. Tonight's name is already cooling against the stone, Quintus Aurelius Modestus. A merchant, once. The client had been clear, but not forthcoming. A woman of some standing, not noble, but seen, had provided the coin 2 days past. Her message, thickened with pauses, did not speak vengeance. Rather, something else, something without a word, to bind him where he already cannot go. Her hands did not tremble when she passed the folded slip of bark with his name and a single Latin phrase repeated 9 times. She wore oil perfume too rich for the market, sandalwood, and smoke. When she crossed the threshold to leave, her veil snagged on a splinter beside the door. That night, the curse writer did not sleep. Lead takes folding best at the hour before dawn. Still warm from the brazier, its surface receives the stylus not like stone or parchment, but like skin, responsive, almost elastic in the right heat. The stylus must be bronze, not iron, which resists the soft metal. And never bone. Bone judders. He places the sheet upon a worn slab blackened smooth from years of friction. One hand anchors, one guides. The name is incised without haste. Q or Modestus, spaced unevenly, one syllable drifting into the blank. Then again, with tiny fractures introduced upon the M, a split signal, a slight confusion in its clarity. Modestus will be felt as both man and marker. These things matter. The gods who listen at water's edge are half deaf, half literal. They know suffering by rhythm, not grammar. The stylus pauses. The phrase must be repeated now, 9 times. The original bark slip had been written in a shaky trade dialect, not standard Latin, but he recognizes the inversion of word order. A borrowing from Hispania, perhaps, or stolen from a tavern prayer. Illum ducite, illum ligate, illum mordite. Lead cools fast. The 4th repetition raises tiny blisters on his palm from touching the stylus too close to its tip. The roasted smell of the brazier's clay dome reaches his nostrils again now, mixed with underlying mineral residue, the returning scent of dressed limestone, bitter with old soot. The well begins to hum. Or rather, no, the silence crests into something structured, precise, like pressure found in the moment before one speaks aloud. Or stops breathing. He breathes. He finishes writing. Now the tablet must be folded. First, once across the name. He presses the crease with the heel of his hand until the lead sighs into slope. Modestus is hidden. Then again, along its length, into a tighter coil. A packet. It becomes less script and more silence. Less letter, more vessel. The spell, if it is one, cannot be read now unless broken open. And breaking a cursed tablet never frees the cursed. Only the malice. That no god will restrain. There is no ceremony to what follows. The curse writer crosses the floor in short, practiced steps. Each flagstone is drier than the last, save the one beside the mouth of the drain. There, a small ridge runs with streaks of brown and gray, evidence not of water, but fingers. Scraped lead oxidizes when it brushes stone, and here it has brushed often. He kneels. The packet rests in his palm like a coin too large for honest trade. He lowers it gently, without blessing, into the drain. The sound, if there is one, does not echo. The brazier has burned low. The air shifts. A finger of cold gasps across the stones. Not a wind exactly, just a withdrawal. Something leaving gently. Still kneeling, he listens. Nothing calls back. 30 years ago, in this same twilight chamber, someone carved a symbol into the back wall. Not where the living see, but down by the floor, where only knees and skin brush in contact. As if, before curses sank into lead, they hung briefly on the brick itself. A shape not quite Roman, not quite italic. Twin circles joined by a crack through the middle. He notices it now where the brazier's glow reflects faint gold into the grout. The mark remains, though faded with soot. Still whole, but that isn't the full record. According to a fragment recovered from a nearby grave in the year the bats flooded, a scribe once scratched his own name into the base of that wall, beside the mark, and 3 weeks later burned all his instruments. But his name was not Modestus, and the grave bore no symbols. Only a folded length of lead, wrapped in linen, buried in the mouth of a clay water jug. Inside it, no writing could be found. Only a scratch, only the crease. There had been 3 letters on the bench that morning. One was dry, one was torn along the edge. The last had been sealed with too much wax, a disk of red fat curling at its rim, the mark inside no longer legible, if it ever was. None of them were opened, not by the boy whose job it was to clean the benches, nor by the copyist who only ever came drunk before noon. Even the old man, who once read aloud the stories of Croton salt harvests and had a talent for making ink with boiled walnut husk, passed them with a mutter and an averted glance. Nothing marked them as cursed, of course. No lead tablets, no scratched iron. Not yet, but the letters waiting on the plaster bench did not travel by hand. They arrived by ash. In a city sunk between 2 crumbling hills, where the air thickens with chalk dust and lamp oil, There is a space behind the Temple of Mercury and used since the plague decades ago. A scriptorium built with no windows and only one door, cut low into the ground so that the wind cannot enter without permission. There's no altar inside, no bench for prayers, nothing sacred, just the long table, warped by moisture, and a cluster of wax boards scorched too slowly to be discarded. Everything smells of figwood and iron combs. The table's edge bears the same chisel-smoothed words, lingua scripta mene, the tongue that writes endures. But the paint has faded until only the word mene remains, stained dark by soot from nearby brazier pits long unused. It's not a warning. It's a memory that won't be erased. This morning, before bell song, before even the baker's girl crushed the first handful of flour for ritual bread, the boy came early. Not to clean, not to fetch, to sit. He is too young to copy properly. His Latin is unstable and his hand drags in poor weather. But he's patient, and he listens as if born without voice. They have started calling him Tertius, the third one to fill the place of the first boy, the one whose name is now forbidden near writing tables. When the second went missing, only the head scribe noticed what was left behind. A quill without shaft, a wet circle where wax had once pooled, and the smell, not oil, not pine bark, but something sweeter. It is the only scent the boy knows for certain now. Morning smoke, rising from scripts that should not survive. He waits until the haze clears from the center of the room. The 3 unopened letters are still there, but someone has left a lead fragment beside them, warm to the touch though the fire hasn't been lit. That is the first sign. The second, a fine ridge of sanded black grit trailing from the ledge, dust too fine for city winds to race. It points toward the writing slab in the far alcove, a place where natural light never reaches, only the moisture that condenses between stones during Lent, when silence lasts longer than usual. He follows the trail. The bench is still warm. He knows what he must do. With a shallow breath, he draws back the old cloth set over the low shelf where styluses were once stored. They are gone now, most stolen, some broken by civic decree during the last census. But beneath the cloth lies a sheaf of wax boards, brittle and scratched, darkened with pigment not used in temple lessons. On none of them are prayers written, nor transactions. Instead, names repeated, half-formed pleas, broad-lettered invocations pressed slantwise into honey-burned wax, Latin so slurred with borrowed vowels it might be mistaken for a gasp. Some are signed only with a tooth mark. Today's wax bears no message, only motion. Something has been smoothed multiple times, rubbed nearly clean, but exposed again with enough pressure along the ridges. The boy tilts it toward the light. Then he sees it. Quem p ver ber perdat. Quem liciti rut. Whomever through truth is struck, let him fall, though it is permitted. The line is miscopied, scattered out of order, with verbs placed where no god would accept them. But the symbols in between, the marks, the angles of the wrist, those aren't his. He didn't write this. Someone has returned, or never left. He doesn't touch the wax again. Not yet. Not before the fire. Instead, he strikes flint. In the shallow coals under the main slab, he builds the flame not with sacred oils or oiled parchment, but with shards. Old invocations shaved into curls. A wax thread from last week's broken seal. Reeds cracked lengthwise until they flake like prayer husks. The fire kindles slowly, always slower than expected. It will burn only the parts unwilling to be kept. Above it hangs a shallow bronze pan blackened with centuries of ash. He adds the first page. It curls instantly, smoke rising like incense, laced with fig sap and vinegar. The boy does not look away. His eyes water, but he does not blink. He adds the second. It's blank. Still it burns. But the third doesn't catch. Its edge blackens. It warps. But the fire cannot consume the center. The mark, a crescent gouged in wax, becomes visible just a second before dissolving. Not erased, just hidden again by flame-veined ash. And from somewhere deep in the stone, below the fire brick, something shifts. Not sound, not movement, just the absence of both, all at once. From the boy's lungs, the breath leaves without being exhaled. For a moment, the wax board seemed to sweat. He notices his fingertips have bruised at the tips, pale and ridged, as if forcibly pressed against a pattern beyond memory. He withdraws them from the table's edge. The air tastes iron-heavy, but that isn't the final sign. When he exits the scriptorium, the brazier still smolders. The soot forms tiny spirals on the old lead scrap by the bench. Spirals left by someone else's stylus, not recent, not ancient, but returned. He does not clean the bench. He does not fetch more wax. He does not write the name. He walks instead to the taberna under the baths, where the floor slopes toward the whisper drain, where another hand will take the message and might understand its shape before fire takes it for good. He will not speak. He will press the unwritten wax into the palm of the man who knows which names are meant to survive, even when fire says no. And still, some words do not burn because they were never dried. Some letters never fade, because they were written not with ink, but with breath someone dared not finish taking. The marble floor was scrubbed the day before, not for cleanliness. Hygiene belonged to the bathhouses, not this hall, but for the weight of ceremony. Here, in the small nave between the olive-wood doors and the market-facing colonnades, things were said loud enough to be witnessed, though often soft enough not to outlive the hour. The corners smell perpetually of hyssop and cold wax. Gilt plaster peels along the lower edges of the frieze. Beneath the fresco of justice with scales upheld, the plaster has discolored, not from fire, but from so many backs leaning inward during words they did not want to remember. High on the eastern wall, an inscription in rusted bronze letters has long since lost 3 of its words to age and tampering. What remains is this: Fides est, faith is, and nothing more. She enters without a veil, trailing only a narrow silk wrap across the back of her shoulders. The hem catches traffic dust from the street and grates briefly against the worn edge of a pillar. She does not adjust it. Behind her, 2 attendants keep pace without speaking. Both carry small pouches, but only one weight is visible: a folded linen bundle, damp at its corner, bound in thin lead wire. She is not noble, not by rank anyway, but her body moves like it once had been, or nearly was, a grace not of effort, but of habit. The priests note this. So does the scribe, who has already begun to warm the writing board with a shallow pan of coals. Today's decree is not civic. It is personal, and it is to be witnessed. At the center of the chamber stands a heavy-backed table marked with the city's seal, a crude attempt at the twin eagle motif of Rome's magistratura, but the image is distorted, too regional, too new. The woman does not look at it. Instead, she rests her curled fingers on the flat of the table's surface and waits. The priest points wordlessly to a bowl of lustral water. One of her attendants lifts it. She declines. Water will not make this clean. The oath is brief. She claims her name, not spoken, but pressed onto clay the day before. Her legal rights are affirmed by presence. Her case is offered not by grief or anger or threnody, but by fabrication. A bruise shaped like an amphora handle, a mirror gone missing and replaced, a servant who won't speak. These are laid out like ruins, not evidence. The weight of absence, delivered plainly. Then, a name, Gaius Silanus Vero. It falls into the room without weight. A name that sounds punishing only to those who know his silence. A man avoided by his own clients. A husband by law, but not by presence. The woman names him. Once. Just once. No one writes it down. Instead, the priest prompts the motion of the hand. The right one. She raises it. She means to. Her arm obeys. So does her wrist. But the fingers. The fingers stay slightly curled, flexed too tightly against her palm. No one speaks. The oath is accepted anyway. But there's a scar beneath her fingernails, deep in the web between thumb and index, and one digit, the smallest, is bound with a thong of oiled fabric, as if it had once cracked open and had been refused healing. She lowers the hand. The words that follow are for the scribe and the lead tablet. She will pay, not here, but later, with coin engraved with her mother's name. She requests the curse to be written not as vengeance, but as retention. He may not take her womb's name. He may not dismiss her shadow from his threshold. He may not remember her with joy, nor forget her with ease. Her words are shaped not by vengeance, but by constraint. The scribe does not blanch, but he does write slowly. Later, in the chamber under the baths, the curse writer receives this in parts. The tablet arrives folded but blank. The words have been traced upon a parchment that has since burned. The impression left behind is faint, illegible, but clearly patterned. He studies it against the brazier's glow. She wanted it written in triplicate, folded into each void she believes his presence still haunts. A box under the eaves, a drawer above the kitchen amphory, the old oak chest that no longer opens. But the curse cannot be divided without breaking. So, instead, he writes it as a spiral. Not like a snail shell, not pure geometry. A spiral of uneven arcs, each line broken deliberately, split mid-sentence, and resumed further inward. Her name, the name she used before marriage, is bent sideways into a voice she never used aloud. Her mother's name is tucked between lines, so small it mirrors breath, not speech. The writing takes hours. He stops only when blood welts beneath his fingernails from gripping the stylus too tightly. The heat of the brazier has caused the metal to bow slightly along the edges. This is desirable. A softened fold holds more tightly. The tablet is creased inward, first along the long edge, then again, diagonal, until it can no longer lie flat. He takes the thin hammer and taps once to close it. The name Gaius does not appear directly. It is invoked with symbols only a practiced reader of Juris tablets might catch. The tau turned palmward, the double iota offset. His image is spoken, but never his self. Only the shadow is named. Later, when it is lowered into the drain, it will slip down easily, already dampened from the braided cloth used to carry it. The brazier will hiss once, faintly, as if acknowledging the offering. A day passes, then 3. On the 4th, a young servant girl with a torn hem and green-rimmed eyes appears at the threshold of the bathhouse. She offers nothing, but a lead shaving has been sewn into her sleeve. She waits for it to be noticed. When the curse writer unrolls it, the fragment reads only. He has left the city, but his cup remains, and she drinks from it daily. But that isn't the end. A month later, the lead tablet will be recovered during minor repair works beneath the bathhouse floor, discovered by a mason who swears he heard it crack, though no weight had touched it. When lifted, it will already be uncoiling, edges softened not by heat but pressure. Inside, the words will remain visible, though crooked and faint. Except her name. That will be missing entirely. Not scratched out. Just gone. Yet the curse remains active, the words intact, the sentence unbroken, just missing the speaker, as though it had been written by no hand at all. The halls beneath the old taberna are not known by name. There is no inscription above the arch, no etched prayer to Mercury or Sulis by the threshold, only a shallow groove where neither moss nor salt collects. Dust thickens along the side where footfall favors avoidance, and the deeper one descends, the more the walls taste of iron, not blood, nor rust, but that thin, bitter damp that swells in old mouths too long silent. He always arrives after the market closes. Not for secrecy. Secrecy has no place among those who trade in remembrance, but for precision. The hour between the extinguishing of the third brazier and the toll of the civic watch is the only time the heat stays low enough for lead to be coaxed into certainty. In daylight, it refuses to hold. The lines blur. The sentences sweat out their force, and the edge of the stylus weeps speed where it should wound with purpose. But in the dark, In the dark, the metal breathes slowly, and ink, though rare, reveals more than fire. He comes in through the side entrance, his feet wrapped in oiled cloth rather than leather. They leave no trace on the worn floor. His hands carry little. Only a small brass bowl lined with sheep tallow, a square of thin linen scored with ridges, and a stylus made not of bone, nor bronze, but silver wire, wrapped twice at the hilt. Precious, yes. Profane, no? It had once hung from the neck of a temple assistant, but no blessing was ever given. It is here, in this dark, that names take on their full weight. But names alone are insufficient. The spell he prepares tonight is a derivative one, built from fragments passed through mouths too dry to swallow. First spoken by a boy who refused to go near the new bridge because the stones echoed his own birth cry, then echoed in a letter condemned for being unreadable, then copied silently by a widow who hadn't spoken in 8 years and refused to die until the name was written correctly. These are the sources, not law tablets, not temple orders. He does not doubt them, but neither does he believe. Belief is never required. Before him lies the sheet. It is not a lined tablet, nor a formal scroll, not even a proper plate. This one was cut from the base of an old measuring weight, flattened with blows from a priest's mallet. The edges are uneven, and part of the surface pocked where rust had laid in. But it is thin, and darkness has crept into its grooves nicely. He lays the linen over the surface. Gently, he wipes it once, not to clean, but to awake whatever pattern remains from its former life. Lead remembers folds even after they're gone. The grain resists inscriptions it considers impure. Tonight he asks it to receive only absence. Then he prepares the ink. Silver is rare for such work. Gold is too soft, copper too bright. But silver, if pulled fine enough, and soaked for 3 days in goat gall, crushed fig peel, and water drained from a corpse-wash cloth, yields a liquid that glows under moonless watchfire. He stirs it gently, dips the stylus with care, then writes, not in Latin this time, not rightly. The form is Latin, yes, conjugated, traced with the bones of legal phrasing. But the inversion of declension at the edges of the line shows its true origin. This came from a place where Rome had only been rumor when the spell took root. A northern province, perhaps, or a mine far east, where even the foreman whispered before lighting braziers. The line stretches like a wound. Desidium tuum deveravi in lusum, said Umbri non cedent. I have devoured your inaction in the light, but the shadows do not yield. It is not a curse to harm. It is one to summon. Who it refers to is not named. But in the line below, the mark appears, a symbol mistaken, by many, for an astrological glyph, a failed letter of Greek, a mason's flourish. 2 hooks facing inward, nested like a pair of listening ears, too close to scripture to be coincidence. He pauses, then adds a second phrase, in runic abbreviation, half forgotten even by scholars in this city. The stroke of the stylus wavers. Whether from age or memory, it's hard to tell. The silence during this kind of writing is absolute. Not deathly, not cold, but full, as if the chamber thickens to accommodate what is being invited through the words. Histories of others who held the pen differently, who bled their fingers into smudged corners of lead plates, now melted under city cisterns. When he finishes, the scroll is placed not into fire, nor folded like those before. It is left unbent. Instead, a small strip is cut from the edge and placed beneath his tongue. He closes his mouth. Waits. Lead is not meant to be swallowed. But this isn't swallowing. It's stewardship. The words hold only until the body decays or forgets, and he has trained his frame to do neither without permission. The ink dries silently. It does not smear or glisten. It darkens. He tests the tablet with the flat of his palm, visualizing the pressure like inhalation. There, a line tightens. Here, a letter deepens. No corrections are made. If wrong, it was meant to be. Some scribes say silver ink cannot carry hatred, only longing. But he knows differently. Earlier that winter, a woman had come to him with nothing but a ribbon dyed red. She claimed the husband who left her did not betray her, but broke her, and in the breaking there came sorrow, so pure it grew sharp. She whispered her words into the side of a cup she left behind. Her breath stayed there until he wrote it down. He hears that breath now, with the ink still drying. Outside, the bells for markets end toll faintly. 1, then 2. Inside, the silver no longer gleams. It simply is a part of the tablet now, and the chamber grows colder, though no wick was ever lit. Out in the street, days later, the body of a boy will be found with dried fig pulp in his throat, a lead shaving in his sleeve, and a single phrase scrawled up his forearm in blackened ink. Sequitur umbrum, non lumen. Follow only the shadow, not the light. The ink will not wash away. The lead will match the corner missing from the silver-written spell, but no one will ask who wrote it, because by then, the person it was written for will have already returned. The spring appears in no map drafted after the 3rd century. By the scribes of later years, it was marked only as a natural seep, labeled with the same neutral ink used for cleared groves and salt mine foundations. Still, among those who drank from vessels carved before augury rites were taxed, its name endures in the pressure behind the tongue. Nascitur sine voce, born without voice. The water emerges not from rock, but from moss. It pushes quietly from beneath a curtain of black humus and lichen-threaded root, coiling into the shallows where no current forms. The pool beneath it is wide but shallow, ringed with burrows and fallen pottery encrusted with calcium rind. There are no insects, no birds. The grass around it grows the same height each year, flame-thin even in spring. The trees nearby do not twist toward the light, and no tracks ever lead to its edge. To drink it is not forbidden, nor is it taught. It simply isn't done. Even shepherds who lose animals near its banks will fetch them only under daylight, calling not by name, but by whistle. They do not speak while they search. They do not turn their backs to the pool. And above all, they do not kneel. It is not sacred. It is only remembered. But for the curse writer, the spring has use. Tonight marks the turning of the half-year, an ambiguous threshold in the old calendar, where temple bells are rung not for devotion, but for absence. A time known in older farms and hinter households as the night when empty places must be spoken for. He brings with him a folded scrap of bark and a small brazier, not lit. The writing has already been done. The commission was unclear. A merchant without known rivals, survived by a wife, not yet mourned. A death not investigated, but not ignored either. Suspicion spoke at the funeral, not loud, but through the details. No offerings, no oil, no shrine stone. Only one object was found in the ash pit beside his estate. A spindle wrapped in charred linen, bearing the faintest traces of forged bronze filings, the ancient remnants of anchor ties normally buried with sailing vessels. At the heart of the coil, a name. It wasn't his. The curse writer studied it late into the night, copying it poorly at first, then more surely when its rhythm became familiar. It was not Latin. Something earlier. Something curved. He folded it around water-softened bark and dipped the edge in wax. He waited, and now he kneels beside the spring, though it has rained, and the earth has not hardened. The cloth he unrolls over his knees is stained from past spells, a threaded pattern of ash, spit, and soot that has, over years, grown so dense it no longer absorbs light or water. It is where each binding begins. The parchment is set flat, and the bark lies upon it, still warm from being near the chest. He does not speak aloud. The offering is not sharp enough for speech. Instead, he holds the bark toward the pool. The scent here is not just of rot. It is of iron condensed too long in cold places, distilled over centuries into the prayerless hush that follows the end of a name. He waits for the ripple. Not all do, he's been told. Some simply drop the tablet and leave. But tonight he waits, And after the time it takes for morning oil to cool into clumps, the surface of the spring shivers, not from contact, but from direction. Emotion rises from the deepest part, though no stone is dropped, no wind lifts. It comes from beneath, not up, but outward, forcing the water along a new line, away from where he kneels. Only then does he release the bark. It floats for a moment, long enough to reflect the slit crescent of the moon. Then it is pulled under, not sinking, but taken, as if sideswiped by pressure from below. He draws in a breath, but not a full one. From his satchel, he removes a coin blackened with heat. Not Roman currency. Earlier, possibly forged. Its relief has nearly faded, only the faintest crosshatch where a face might have been. This he rubs against the cloth. Once. Then he exhales across its face. Once. Then sets it, not in the pool, but to the side of the moss bank, just at the rim, where the soil has hardened into a fine black crust, speckled where water should have spilled but hasn't. It's where other coins have once been. He never sees them again. This is how currency speaks before religion, one offering per name, not to affirm judgment, but to delay its final erasure. Back in the town, they will not know what tablet was offered, only that the taxes owed by the merchant's widow are no longer considered valid, and the scroll bearing his estate inventory will be sent back, unopened, bound not by wax, but by a single silver hair knotted across the seal. The archivist will not protest. He will simply mark non-respit in the ledger, not received, and in the bathhouse corridor, the next offering will find its place sooner than planned. Another thread, another name, but this one delivered to water that does not feed streams, nor quench thirst, nor preserve saints. A pool that forgets by burying the memory in permanence. And still, weeks later, a woman unlinked to the merchant will emerge along the narrow road where trees grow too evenly on either side. Her hair will be half shorn, her sleeves stiff with dried clay, and she will carry a coin, darkened, faceless, warm. She will say no words, but leave it on the threshold of a scriptorium, long close to the public, and beneath the old fig tree whose roots line the path above the baths. A gull will be found with no eyes, but a tongue carved with 6 glyphs. Vivus, said in or aquae, alive, but in the mouth of water. The tongue will not decay. The tree will stop bearing fruit. But the spell, the earlier one, that one will change shape, because no one was supposed to speak the name again. And yet, in the civic rolls for the year of strange calms, the long summer where no horses foaled and olive oil spoiled in sealed amphorae, there is a name etched 3 times. Once among grain creditors in the 4th quarter, once by hand, added below a death disbursement already inked, and once, without date or roll, among those exempted from temple tax by sickness. That name is Lucius Fabius Regulus. What makes it strange is not that the name appears more than once, nor even that it shifts spelling across entries, once Regulus, once Regvolfs, ligatured against the page's margin. In this city, transcription errors aren't rare. What is strange is that every appearance survives with clarity, no abrasions, no fades, no wax warping, and yet no burial can be traced, no record of offerings, no morning bread. And on a quiet vineyard slope 2 miles east of the Forum, a polished tomb bears no name at all. The stone is ovoid, an archaic shape more common in older towns, carved with no inscription lines and only a faint vertical groove suggesting placement for a stylus. No one claims it, but its grass remains unnaturally flat in high wind, and those who sleep nearby report something peculiar. Dreams that taste of unlit vinegar. The curse writer becomes aware of Regulus by paper first. A half-torn fragment delivered folded in a child's practice slate, left wedged in the molding between his work table and the old storage nook hollowed out by decades of flame. The handwriting is halting but deliberate, every vowel dragged, every consonant wrung of breath. The tablet's message is without obvious plea. He sleeps on no bed. He walks past no mirror, but his name returns, each time lesser than before. This is not a curse. This is a preparation. That night, he chooses not ink, nor silver, nor bone-scraped stylus. He chooses the red clay tablet kept beneath a bundle of coiled reeds, an emergency writing form, not used since the honey famine, when 70 names vanished and were found scratched into a single bell clapper buried in soot. By firelight, carefully controlled, he writes. Not directly. The first layer is carved in code, simple glyphs, made deliberately mistaken, then sealed in wax and scraped over again until the grooves are nearly indistinguishable from old erosion. This is the protection layer, not to hide, but to confuse. The true curse must be difficult to read, even by those it summons. Beneath it, folded in a linen sheath, the name itself, written twice, first in place, then backwards, one letter removed with each receding syllable. This is a rite not recorded in temple archives, but passed down through laborers who bury coins in exchange for silence in slander trials. One folds the name until it no longer returns sound when spoken, a drawing inward, thinning the person from memory until only obligation remains. Obligation, among curse writers, is a condition more final than death. To forget someone fully, so that their injustice does not return to haunt or be repeated, requires the mirroring of their name. To write it once makes it a grievance. To write it twice makes it a grave. He folds the tablet once over the writing. A cruciform break appears in its sealing mark, unplanned. He doesn't repair it. Instead, he places the bundle in the hollow of a heat-eaten jug, fills it with black sand collected from the oldest corner of the forum wall, where horses still shun the passage even when led in full daylight, and waits. The burial must happen at a shifting threshold, neither civic nor sacred, neither home nor ruin. The space between. He chooses the tomb on the slope, the one without a name. At dusk, he walks there barefoot. No brazier, no light, just the jug, just the borrowed shovel, blunt with use. It is not a full burial. He does not dig down. The jug must be set sideways, its mouth angled toward hollow ground, the kind that hasn't borne seed or grain in more than 2 years. As the jar meets earth, he hears the pressure shift inside. A hiss, not moisture, not salt, but a seal parting from within. He covers it anyway, does not mark the spot. 3 days later, in the scriptorium near the baths, the ledgers will be updated again. The name Lucius Fabius Regulus will disappear from the creditor list and remain only in the sickness exemption, an entry re-inked strangely, with a wider margin around its letters. Elsewhere, a provincial census scrap recovered from a collapsed stairwell in nearby Tiber will surface. On it, the same name appears under a different hand, annotated with a note in poor Latin. No longer known by memory. Keep from re-entry. After that, stranger things. A grain distributor finds the seal missing from his house corner. No one stole it, but it will no longer imprint wax. The handle feels hollow. In the shade of the anonymous tomb, shepherd dogs refuse to rest. One is found curled against the base stone, tongue cracked and silent. Not dead, but unable to open its eyes. A magistrate under suspicion for land hoarding is issued a guilty sentence. His name? Gaius C. Fabius, no known link to Regulus. Yet something trembles in the clerk's hand when writing it. And beneath the baths, in that chamber always half-warmed and never fully dark, the curse writer finds a wax shard slipped beneath his brazier. Scratched across its edge, he has a name again, but now it is not his. He does not copy it. He does not answer. He simply unwraps a clean strip of linen cut from an oil apron and waits for the next name to be handed through the cracks. Where graves speak only half as loud as they ought to. Where names are buried. Again and again, until silence fits like a seal too tight to remove. The harbor at Brundisium wakes not like a city, but like a throat clearing after unwanted dreams. Here, Sails do not unfurl to winds. They rub open, damp with salt and time. The ropes ache, waterlogged from seasons laid heavier than expected. Light, chalk-thin, slides across the water uncertainly, interrupted by the matted canvas of trade ships moored overnight. And on the wharf's edge, a crate is being inspected. Gently, too gently to be anything but familiar. The customs mark is clear, a squared circle, inked in the trader's own hand. And yet, the wax seal affixed to its front bears a crescent twinfish, the private emblem of a man last recorded as buried during the siege of Thessaly, 12 winters past. A funeral was held, witnessed. The man's name was sung into a copper bell submerged in vinegar and nailed to a widow house lintel. That bell still sings, but only at dusk, and only when left untouched. Inside the crate, lead plates, uncut, bundled tight with palm oil-soaked wool rope. Legal by weight, unpaid by tariff. 2 port assessors take notes. One is careful, the other indifferent. But neither comments on the shape burned into the soft side of the crate. An impression not of handling, nor lash, but a twin-mirrored form, as if a stylus had been pressed against the grain too long. Not by accident. And folded in the corner, tucked behind a layer of brittle nettle wrap, lies a smaller parcel. Thin, cool, familiar. The binder's string bears no dye, but holds a residue of something vegetal, sweet. Palm oil, not pressed for sacrifice, nor sold for consecration, but the kind poured over hands during a silent bargain. The kind used for dyeing tongues when names must be spoken once and witnessed by no one. This is how his name travels now. The man who sent the crate, whose ledger mark trails across 37 receipts and twice as many unspoken promises, no longer holds a house. Only movement. His base of accounting was dissolved mid-cycle during the realignment of civic fees. And before testimony could be sought, the record-keeper tasked with his arrest woke with a bloodless nose and no comprehension of his own name until sundown. No coins exchanged hands. Only lead, slabs, sheets, fragments, all wrapped in cloths reeking faintly of metal and sweet oil. The superstition began quietly, unwritten, that if a trader could not pay debts in coin or cattle, he might offer lead. But it must be unspoken lead. That is, no tally, no stamp of city issue. Lead cut for weight, not for record. It started in the ports, then the border towns, then more inland. Quiet curses, sold between crates, smuggled alongside dried nettles, lentils, waxed pears. Epithets inscribed in triplicate. Not spoken, not signed, just transported, salted with oil-soaked reed, and always accompanied by a symbol, not of the gods, but of the lost. The twinfish seal. By now, the curse rider receives them weekly. Coils of lead, still warm from sun and breath, arrive wrapped in reed matting, sealed with imported wax, not Roman. Something softer, hand-scented, always perfumed with the same oil used to anoint the trade hall coin ledgers in distant Tripolitania before the outbreak and the subsequent record fires. He does not reject them. The names rarely come attached. Only impressions, traders' marks, partial curses, complaints shaped like prayers. He who called me a thief forgot my mother has not yet died. Let the next buyer see ruin, then beauty, then ruin again. May his tasting cup remember my brother's name before his own. The writing is less careful than customary curses. It is faster, more transactional, bitter at the edges. These are not invocations for justice. They are burdens passed from one ledger to another, insults flattened until they become currency. And every complaint, every minor sealing, every affirmation of wrath soft-wrapped in palm oil has the same trend. No centurion opens them. No divine counters them, because they were never offered to the gods, only to one another. Curses become commerce. He begins inscribing them differently, not vertically, not in the old longhand favored by temple servants. These are marked horizontally, flattened like land deeds. Not full names, only ident pricks or reputation titles, truncated sigils, house terms only recognized in shipping circles, abbreviated phrases meant to be seen, not recited. The writing becomes a market dialect of desperation. Not may he fall, but may his trade rot in sleep. Not bind him, but dry his tongue in the taste of the figure. Even script changes. The stylus used for these scripts is duller now, and layered with a gloss of pressed brine. It skips, sticks, abrasions multiplying, as if the words themselves resist permanence. And so, he returns to folding. Once folded, the tablets go into storage, not dropped into the bath drain, not offered to spring or shrine. These are stacked, quietly, shuffled into crates indistinguishable from others on the ground floor of the forum's storage bank. Unmarked, unlisted. Sometimes he wonders what name he has begun to carry. There is a smell on his skin. Not lead, not oil, both too real. This is the absence of something that once led men to kneel. An old archivist calls it forum stink, that half-forgotten bitterness shared by dropped prayers and unsigned contracts. It clings in roof thatch, in pouches sat too long on stone, in the bent elbows of the men who trade nothing until it eats them whole. Later still, a new crate arrives, structure collapsed, water damaged, yet sealed. When removed from the wrapping, the contents include no lead, no parchment, no name. Only a single folded length of palm frond tied, with that same vegetal residue, sweet, thick. Inside, pressed on both sides with equal force. He wrote our curses as numbers until the air forgot them. Now we write his name, not to curse, but to spend. The stylus is held longer that night. He burns nothing, records nothing. He simply folds the tablet, and for the first time since the Red Coin Festival, hides it beneath the floorboard facing east, where commerce always begins, and consecration is already too late to matter. Script is not just shape. It is compression, pressure, blind rhythm. It can be taught using fire-charred boards and copied by watching the way a shadow shortens at the turning of certain letters. But true script, curse script, must be absorbed beneath the skin. It changes the way a wrist moves. Tonight the floor sweats, again, not slick, as when the bathhouse overhead runs hot with pilgrims, but dense, granular, like flour compressed in a wet cloth. The stone darkens too quickly when touched. Wood tools feel spongy. Even the breath in the chamber seems layered. No fire is lit. Too much heat drives the lead back into its memory. Today's tablets are thin, carved already, passed down not by the client, but by a rested woman with a carved finger bone sewn into the lining of her blouse. She unwound it with a silence more fluent than any speech, pressed the bundle into the folds of the writing cloth, and left a single pantomime behind. The briefest scratch across her own jaw, side to side, mirroring throat cut. Not a death wish, not vengeance, but a silencing. He waits until evening to open it. The wrapping is coarse, waxed in parts, with the pungent scent of dried marrow. It unfolds in 3 stages. First, the outer cloth stained with fig ash, then a papyrus sleeve, split halfway through from too much folding, and at last, 2 lead sheets curved inward like they were peeled from a rib. They bear writing already, just faint. The lines curl wrong, too imperfect to be formal, too methodical to be trembling. He recognizes the motion. Script carved by imitation, not long practice, and not with bronze. He traces the marks and feels something give, inside, not in the lead. The stylus beside him, resting against the cloth with its bronze tip polished gray from finger oil, catches the edge of one scratch. And there it stops. Bronze has no catch unless it meets something older, something layered like a scab. He peers closer. Embedded in the strokes, pressed so finely the outer layer of lead has opened in splinters along the marks, points of vivid oxidization, pink, too red to be rust. Not the bloom of damp metal, but something from flesh. Scratches that bled, not written with bone, as he first assumed. not bone-carved, but bone-used. He gathers the warp and run of the lines. The text is not a curse by formula. This is a binding, but without name, without crime. Instead, each line ends in a repeated symbol, a broken spiral, never closed. He's seen it once before, folded into the hollow of a woman's shoe whose husband had vanished long before the census. Her message was hardly audible through the script, but the shape remained, the sign of an unresolved word. Something meant to be said, but never formed. A language made from halted speech. He drinks water, slowly, knowing it will taste more of metal now, and begins his rewrite. He doesn't replicate, doesn't copy. He receives. Not what's written, but how it was written. He mimics the form through his own hand, matching pressure, angle, drag. The stylus moves the way a cracked finger tries to close, unwillingly, with burden. The tablet resists. Parts of it flake. The bronze cuts too deeply in certain strokes, too shallow in others. That is part of the process. The intention is not clarity, but continuity. To extend the motion of the first writer, the woman who, unskilled, placed her grief so finely into the line that even the metal cracked in agreement. As he nears the final phrase, the chamber's light takes on color, not from flame, nor lamp, nor dusk, but from reflection. The lead glints faintly, though no edge is sharp, like silver caught under wine. The letters flicker along curves, warped as if watched through water. The final inscription: let him who fractured the word sleep in names unformed. He touches the edge, carefully. There is no signature, but there is a mark, shallow, unmistakable. The edge of a tooth. Human. Pressed once, near the last line. A molar's impression, set so precisely it can only mean consent. Or obedience. He folds the new script, but it will not crease evenly. Each bend ripples with resistance. The lead stays warmer than normal, softening too late. Even after hours, it refuses to lie flat. Something inside the binding breathes unevenly. Not like life, more like memory unsatisfied. It wants to be written further, to complete a thought left tremoring at the edge of language. He resists. He wraps it, pins it with wax. 3 days pass before he returns, and by then, the folded script has left dark traces in the cloth. Not mold, not soot, lines, barely visible unless held to the brazier rim. New lines, expanded phrases, a continuation, but not written by his hand, or hers, which leaves the question not of authorship or of intent, but of completion. Who finishes a script written in fracture? Who carves with symbols drawn from silence? He doesn't rewrite it. He merely marks the cloth and stores it carefully beneath the unused brazier stones, where warmth cannot easily catch, and where other scripts, not yet complete, have begun to tremble. In their sleep, no one saw the girl enter. There was no report filed with the sacristan, no mention in the temple gate ledger, and no servant admitted to opening the west passage. Yet when the morning shadows thinned along the limestone floor behind the north font, she was there, kneeling. Her feet were bare, not from poverty. Her garments were finely stitched linen, dyed carefully despite age, but from something more precise. The dirt along the soles formed no lines. Exposed, but untouched. A child who had walked far enough that even the stones agreed not to press against her. The priest who found her said nothing. He observed the thin sheen of oil along her arms, the scent not frankincense nor myrrh, but bitter almond and ash bark. Not holy oil, and yet it clung as only a consecration would. The font had been dry since midsummer. No baptism scheduled, no salt kept freshly ground. The ladle hadn't been used since the Cinders Daylight Festival 4 fortnights earlier. Still, her palms glistened as if dipped, and her mouth was closed, not from prayer, nor humility, but with strain, the kind of silence one wears like a patched garment, intact only by pressure. At her side, bundled in the cloth of an old votive sash, was a letter, not sealed, not folded for delivery. just wound tightly enough to be warmed by body heat and sweat. The writing inside did not match her hand. Too old. Too fast. It read, "She is of no line. Speak her name to no God. Let the oil protect what the water cannot cleanse." There was no signature. When the curse writer received word, it was not by temple runner, nor friar's boy, but through an altar plate, left at the foot of his stall, filled with goat's teeth and shaved wax. His name etched around the rim by a broken stylus that someone had clearly tried to sharpen with a nail. In the basin, half buried in curved enamel, was the same votive sash. The letter had gone, but in its place, a single line scratched into dried walnut husk, pressed so hard the wood splintered. She bears no curse, only redirection. The rest he must gather alone. He waits until third dusk, when even the baths go quiet and the kiln smoke flattens against the tiled ceilings. Her footprints remain in the pale lime underfoot, preserved by the damp of old offerings and reluctance. He follows them. They scatter not in confusion, but in evasion, circling the font, the old altar, the place where votive pots collect names forgotten too early, places where memory gathers, each print incomplete, as if weight fled her heels before full contact. No curse writer writes without residue. He inspects the sash. Threads from the shoulder cloth bear signs of thread oil hastily applied, used in cipher rituals to ward off scholars of the dead tongue. Not harmful, but private, hiding the origin of a girl presumed to have none. And on the inside hem of the sash, invisible until rubbed with powdered lead, spoken once in error, found thereafter, the writing is not protective, it's directional, like canal gates, redirecting what would drown into channels that merely delay. In ritual, baptism preserves. By water, by salt, by name. But the girl had no name offered, just the oil, the kind poured during harvest prayers for crops that were already dead, but buried anyway, so the pests would not talk. He sets the wax tablet upon the table. Tonight, no name will be written. This is not a curse to fall upon someone. It is a rebalancing, a script built from implication, not address. He begins to inscribe using the dull side of the stylus, widening each stroke as if writing in a language meant for gods that hear only shape, not sound. 2 lines. Keep her breath below the threshold of audible names. Let her stomach never carry a syllable risen from the bloodline. He stops, touches the bronze edge of the stylus to his wrist, lets it chill, places it back. Instead of folding, he burns violet wax into the tablet's underside, a mark only visible under smoke shadow, then buries it, not underground, but beneath the votive ledge at the back of the baths, behind the third tile, where the scent of pressed laurel sometimes returns even when there is no tree, no wind. He says no spell, no command, just rests the oil-stained sash beside the untouched basin. A week passes. No one claims the garment. But in the fountain at the city border, where children dare one another to speak their names backward for luck, a voice is heard one morning, curled inside the stone. Not loud, not high, not angry, just a girl's voice, saying something backwards. That was never heard forwards. The priest returns to check the font. Still dry, still cold. Yet the oil ring beneath the basin has deepened, pressed itself into the limestone. Hard enough to catch ash when wind passes. Hard enough to leave scent in cloth. But not a trace of salt. The olive grove lay fallow for 3 years, though the roots stayed vigorous and the branches bore no canker. The elders said it was the soil, too sour from the late storm, or disturbed by moles that didn't belong. But the workers didn't believe that. They stopped digging new furrows long before the dry season. Their reason was more direct. Bread kept disappearing. Not at once, not like theft, but slowly, methodically. Loaves left at the grove's edge, pressed quietly into the stone bark of the largest trunk. Never with wrappers, never tied. The offerings were gone by first light. Birds did not touch them, nor did rats. Only crumbs at the roots, damp long after sunrise. No one confessed to the tradition. No one admitted knowing who began it. But most had seen the boy. Small, quiet, with fists like someone practiced in prayer long before knowing a single god's name. Too careful for begging, not wild like the market orphans. He only came at dusk, with a wrapped bundle under his tunic, and eyes that never scanned, only waited. Only the shepherds, tending the far slope beyond the grove, ever glimpsed where he went. Because on the far side of the stone rose, below a strange lean in the earth's skin, there is a mound. Not marked, not cut, only softened, like something once heavy settled and stayed. A grave unrecorded, and someone was feeding it. The curse writer learned of it third hand. A woman compelled by half ownership of the grove came to him with a scrap of broken tile, on which was pinned a child's handprint, and beneath it, in ochre ink, the rough outline of a loaf. No message, no names. At first he refused. But that night, when he pressed his stylus too hard, the lead snapped open like wet clay, and its edges stung with a smell he hadn't met since before last autumn. Spelt, fermentation, and damp wool. Bread turned to memory. The next evening, he found the grove. The shepherds didn't greet him. They stepped aside. The trees did not rustle. And at the far end, yes, the press in the underbrush. A space flat where it should have furrowed, rising subtly with rotted hay to one side. From the scorched hollows below a stone ledge, flies circled, slowly, but never touched down. He placed no bread, only a flat wooden slate, and beside it, a stylus dulled with sheep tallow. He returned home, said nothing, returned again the next night. The board had moved, so had the dirt beneath the ledge. A loaf, wrapped in cheap cloth, sat atop the stone, still whole, still warm at its center, but now alongside it, writing, not carved, not pressed, just traced, with fingertips, scrawled sideways across a line that didn't follow the board's grain. She's not in her own grave. And beneath that, after two shakier tracings, he put her where he thought she'd starve quietly. But she remembers. He'll need to starve now, too. No one signed it. The curse writer did not touch the bread. He took the writing. Back in the stone chamber, he works with crossed time, layering older symbols into shapes faintly borrowed from childhood menus, votive offerings, bread cart sigils. He writes not to curse the nameless man, but to bind the absence she left. There must be punishment. Yes, but first a correction. He carves 3 lead plates. One with space, not name, left blank but framed. One with shape, the outline of bread pressed exactly as it was seen. And one with inversion. A funerary script borrowed from ancestral ovens, used during famines to keep hunger from lingering across generations. Each plate folded once, then offered, not into water, not to fire, but buried in the shallow earth behind the ledge, where the child left crumbs. He watches the soil sag, just barely. He marks the spot, burns the stylus tip, and waits. 3 mornings later, a civic official from the grain house reports an unusual theft. 10 loaves, all unsold, taken from the back shelf. No locks broken, no entries recorded, just a faint trail of imprinted palms on the ash layer by the doorway. Too small for any worker, too recent to be dust. And 1 spoon left behind. A child's spoon, brittle, carved bone, with a name scratched down its handle. But when the clerk attempts inscription, no ink clings to its surface. Because the name isn't meant to be written anymore. Not on wood, not in stone, only in hunger, redirected. There are certain kinds of metal that bend not with heat, nor pressure, nor time, but with permission. The curse writer does not learn this from books. Books speak in the language of curvature, surface tension, minerals softened to accept narrative. But this is something else. This is refusal, not defiance. Lead does not defy, it withholds. And tonight, the sheet withholds completely. He receives it just before dusk, passed from the hands of a minor bookseller whose tongue bears scars from speaking glyphs aloud he cannot read. He says nothing of the sheet's origin, only presses the wrapped bundle into the folds of the curse writer's outer cloth with fingers trembling slightly above the knuckles, like one still recovering from copper fever. At his side, a messenger bag hangs lopsided with the weight of categorized lies, scrolls, receipts, falsified burial addresses, and at the bottom, the crimped neck of a water flask, sealed in wax. He does not stay to explain. The curse writer waits until the bath's empty, until the arch overhead begins to sigh with steam fading through morning-cold brick. Then, in the chamber below, he unfolds the bundle. At first, it looks ordinary. A narrow length of hammered lead, rough edges, slight scrim along the fold lines, suggesting it had once been bent, then opened again. The wax on its surface bears no seal, just a name scrawled in ink too faint to confirm. Anus Marilis. Torn. The shadow of a G or C. Perhaps Gaius. Perhaps not. The ink is recent. But the lead. He knows instantly. He can feel it even through the cloth. It will not fold. Not because it is stiff. It is soft, in places too soft, even. The corners ripple. The center yields under touch. But the plate resists decision. Where other sheets crease neatly, this one tries and then withdraws, as if the effort to compact the name would awaken something best left diffuse. Instead, it stretches back flat, relaxes, undoes. Even when pressed with both palms, the surface blooms outwards, retaining pressure but offering no permanent collapse. He checks the tools, stylus, wax, burner. Nothing faulty. He heats the edge gently, scrapes a line with bronze. Nothing changes. The words inscribed there react not at all, or perhaps too much, because the message on the tablet shifts, and not from movement of the metal, but from angle. From above, only scratches. From the side, a name. From below, a series of fractures curved like feathers or tears, but written in no language used for cursing, or prayer, or burial. He leans closer, angles the plate beneath the dying glow of a rushlight held low, then sees what happens. Not lettering, contours, as if the lead has remembered faces. Pressed into it are 4, no, 5, partial figures. Not portraits, not illusion, more the shadow of cheeks laid into earth too slowly, then unburied by mistake. The mouth's closed, one with a finger in her teeth, another with no chin at all, only bruised gesture, a head turned too early for the fall, and at their center, a blank, not a sixth face, but absence made whole, like what dust might remember if shaped by breath alone. He touches the space where an inscription should be. Everything coldens. The stylus slips in his hand. He tries to write, just once, a name, any name, Kasha. The line doesn't take. It doesn't fade. It evaporates. The edge glimmers briefly, then returns untouched, as if the act of naming in that space betrays something required to stay unspoken. He folds his cloth, almost, then stops, looks again at the original scrawl in ink. Marilis. He searches the ledger in his left satchel, the pink-stained one with corners burned by collier's ash from the year the well choir collapsed in Prenest. The index lists cursing target names from over 300 confessions, some transcribed, others merely drawn. Marilis appears 3 times. Once, connected to oath renigs during Demetrius's 5th legal cycle. Once, inscribed in broken Latin next to a stylized foot. And once again, without rank or occupation, next to a note which reads, refused return, denied burial. A person unburied creates tensions, but a person refused burial leaves an opening far greater. A name that circles indefinitely, unanchored. He repositions the lead in his hands, takes a clean stylus, warms one end, and does not write this time. Not words, not names. He draws the fold line instead. A simple thing, a guiding edge, and mimics the press of a hand that wishes not to force, but to remember. The tablet receives, softens, does not fold, but accepts a half crease, a bowing, an over gesture. The metal does not hold its shape, but it responds, unspools, slowly, as if inhaling backward. He wraps it in linen darkened with pupil ink, the kind used for merchant records that must be kept only one cycle, then burned, and places it beneath the old cistern notch, where the water never fully drains. The tablet lets out no sound, not even weight. 3 days later, the bookseller who brought it returns. His teeth fall out, cleanly, without blood, 7 molars placed in a cloth, all inscribed, not with curses, but with letters never folded. And when compiled, they spell, "She is not done grieving. Do not fold a feeling still awake." The words inscribed there react not at all, or perhaps too much, because the message on the tablet shifts, and not from movement of the metal, but from angle. From above, only scratches. From the side, a name. From below, a series of fractures curved like feathers or tears, but written in no language used for cursing, or prayer, or burial. He leans closer, angles the plate beneath the dying glow of a rushlight held low, then sees what happens. Not lettering, contours, as if the lead has remembered faces. Pressed into it are 4, no, 5, partial figures. Not portraits, not illusion, more the shadow of cheeks laid into earth too slowly, then unburied by mistake. The mouth's closed, one with a finger in her teeth, another with no chin at all, only bruised gesture, a head turned too early for the fall, and at their center, a blank, not a sixth face, but absence made whole, like what dust might remember if shaped by breath alone. He touches the space where an inscription should be. Everything coldens. The stylus slips in his hand. He tries to write, just once, a name, any name, Kasha. The line doesn't take. It doesn't fade. It evaporates. The edge glimmers briefly, then returns untouched, as if the act of naming in that space betrays something required to stay unspoken. He folds his cloth, almost, then stops, looks again at the original scrawl in ink. Mirrorless. He searches the ledger in his left satchel, the pink-stained one with corners burned by collier's ash from the year the well choir collapsed in Prenest. The index lists cursing target names from over 300 confessions, some transcribed, others merely drawn. Mirrorless appears 3 times. Once, connected to oath renigs during Demetrius's 5th legal cycle. Once, inscribed in broken Latin next to a stylized foot. And once again, without rank or occupation, next to a note which reads, "Refused return. Denied burial." A person unburied creates tensions, but a person refused burial leaves an opening far greater. A name that circles indefinitely, unanchored. He repositions the lead in his hands, takes a clean stylus, warms one end, and does not write this time. Not words, not names. He draws the fold line instead. A simple thing, a guiding edge, and mimics the press of a hand that wishes not to force, but to remember. The tablet receives, softens, does not fold, but accepts a half crease, a bowing, an over gesture. The metal does not hold its shape, but it responds, unspools, slowly, as if inhaling backward. He wraps it in linen darkened with pupil ink, the kind used for merchant records that must be kept only one cycle, then burned, and places it beneath the old cistern notch, where the water never fully drains. The tablet lets out no sound, not even weight. 3 days later, the bookseller who brought it returns. His teeth fall out, cleanly, without blood, 7 molars placed in a cloth, all inscribed, not with curses, but with letters never folded. And when compiled, they spell, "She is not done grieving. Do not fold a feeling still awake." Marks that resemble lettering when seen in reflection, in oil baths, in low dew at dawn. This is how the forgotten are named. At the tower that night, he joins the clockless crowd gathering. No child speaks. No adult explains. They hang the lanterns. Empty. One southwest, one east, one where the old altar used to stand, and one over a well mouth now filled with wax. Why wax? Because water repeats. Wax remembers. He hangs his curse beneath the third lantern. Not tied, threaded. The bark weaves into the unlit metal, vanishes between ribs. Then stillness. And just before dawn, a figure appears. Or rather, reappears. A man with all the markings of the sea. Kelp-caught sleeves, salt-abraded soles, and voice swollen with echo even before sound emerges. He speaks a name. It is not the one written. It is not known. But the crowd looks down. Each person closes one hand, thumb to palm, as if concealing something small. The man leaves nothing behind, not even footprint polish on the packed clay path. But the curse, still threaded, vanishes 2 hours later, without wind, without removal. Later that morning, a fisher returns from the southern harbor with 5 rings of sealing wax borne from undersea clay. He brings no fish, but one of the wax rings bears the twin symbol of the trade script guild that burned in Char 50 years prior. And inside its curve, a name written backward, only part visible. Rias. Not a curse, not a victim, but a vow, renewed, from a lantern that never burned. In a town where light is not needed to be seen. In the precinct of the baths, among the old judicial stalls warped by steam and civic forgetfulness, there is a bench without court mark, set just beside the drainage gutter where spent offerings sometimes backflow. It is not chained, though iron rings once anchored an oath plate to its right edge. No trials are held there now, only waiting. Private, prolonged. Children sit there sometimes, not as punishment, and not always alone. This morning, the seat is dry. Barely. The sun hasn't breached the porticos yet, but someone's weight has pressed the dew into the worn grain of the stone. An outline remains, shaped too small for a grown man, but with heels set firm, not swayed sideways like a waiting beggar's. At its center lies a wax board, cooled flat, and in a curl of water-thin charcoal, faintly rubbed into the wax, a symbol, not a letter. Not entirely, but familiar, drawn like a hand with missing digits. A child's handwriting? Perhaps, but the geometry is purposeful. Each gap follows an invisible rhythm. The absence of fingers echoes a cadence once heard in the stalls, years ago, when the boy's mother was sentenced under silent terms. Her name redacted from the register, her crime replaced with the phrase, non auditus sedum placidum est. Never heard. Still ruled against. The boy had never learned to read. His tutors gave up after 3 seasons. His mouth did not open easily around syllables. Words felt like tasks assigned to the inside of the body. But when he touched the stylus to wax, the patterns came, not from language, but motion. Shapes reoccurred. Slanted arcs with spine-thin gaps. Squares unfurled like cracked chambers. Dual strokes forming marks mistaken for border etchings, or, in one case, for damage from dry rot. No adults paid heed, until the letters in the clerical petitions began returning with ghost lines pressed into their margins. Lines that matched his wax, including names, never sent, including names the boy had never spoken aloud. The curse writer receives the wax board one night folded inside a magistrate's ledger. Unrelated pages, unbound. The insertion is seamless, but he feels the shift behind the bindings. The board is warm, still warm, and it contains no message. Nothing legible. Just pressure. Just that symbol. He places his finger lightly over it. The wax trembles. No movement. No heat gain. Just awareness. The kind the old writers called metal breath, when a stylus's shadow remains in a tablet too long and begins to absorb intention. He softens the wax by hand, melts no edges, penetrates no deeper layer. As he rubs across the scored shape, his own thumb finds resistance. A ridge, then 2 faint impressions under the original surface. Morse-like, pulsed, not drawn. A code, not of war, not church, not trade, Mimicry of language made only by those who shape truth with pressure, not voice. He renders it line by line, uses a fine dusting of soot from temple coal ash to mark the reliefs. Then a word, then another, then a stream of impressions forming grammar and gesture. Heated without light. He watched without eye. He answered only the question they never asked. The testimony unfolds like cloth stiff with dried rain. It names no one, just echoes placements. One child, watched from a trench not wide enough for two. A stone in his palm mistaken for food coils. A coin he did not offer. The magistrate's ledger confirms the date. There was a case, but no boy named. Only an intake witness confessed without record. The language attributed to a clerical assistant. Location unverified. Stand sealed. All unsigned. Yet the wax matches the internal form of the trial declarations, pressed not by stylus, but fingers guided imperfectly by anyone who had ever seen judgment written once, then mirrored backward for safety. The boy knew, not just the name that should have filled the margin, but the motion that placed it there. He gives names without writing them. He writes names without vowels. He removes curse by turning it into record, and the curse writer does not amend this. He copies the shapes, with breath, not flame. He takes red earth from the brazier's broken rim and rubs it into the palm of his writing cloth, then places the board inside, not sealed, not burned, but stored in a wet clay amphora, used once, long ago, to carry field water for burial processions. It now rests in the second shelf beneath the altar ledge, behind the cloths used for unsuccessful bindings. And days later, the board is gone, but the soot symbols remain pressed in the cloth's lining. When held backward to the temple light, they catch in the threads. No ink, no stylus used, just pressure and memory. And, somewhere beyond the baths, a boy spells out the truth. Again, by not spelling it at all. He waits until no carts pass. The harbor winds have dropped, though the ropes still sway from habit. The rigging of unmoored sails clacks softly against wooden jetties stripped long ago of their tariff signs. The merchant's flag is drawn back into its pole, but something shifts behind the canvas. Not wind. Wait, this part of the harbor no longer sees inspection. Not since the grain fire. Not since the magistrate fled. Now, the stalls are filled only with cloth and scent. Nothing counted. And so, when the envoy arrives, unofficial, unsummoned, and draped in pale cinders, they go unspoken. A figure with gesture only, wrapped in thistle-white linen, girded with a thread of red wax. They do not approach the rider directly. Not at first. They kneel instead near the fire ditch, where shipwrecked wood is returned to ash with prayer neither civic nor sacred. When the last ember dies, they rise, and only then walk the spiraling street inward to the baths, past clay roofs still wet from last night's salt fall, past alleys where mosaics crumble faster than memory. They bring no package, only a folded cuff of layered cloth, so tightly pressed it pulses. Inside is a fragment of script, not lead, not wax, but bark soaked through with something black-red, shiny, unfixed. The substance glints dully on the edge of the cloth. At first, the curse writer thinks it ink. Oil and soot, perhaps. Or charred fig dye. It is not. The scent catches first. Astringent, cold, and familiar. Vinegar. The bark had once been inked with haste. Too recently. Too many words collapsed onto too little space. No spacing. No name margins. No breaks. Now nearly blank. Whatever was written has bled inside itself. But one line remains. Burned too deep to erase. Do not raise his name to witness. He is not finished being forgotten. The curse writer has seen this before. Only twice. Both times, the commission had come wrapped in broken shells. Both times, the subject vanished before the final casting of the tablet. And both times, the client left no second stripe of cloth to cover the burial jar. This time is different. This time, the envoy leaves behind coal. Not live, not smoldering, Just meal coal, crushed fine and saturated with the runoff from a vinegar basin used to rinse bodies after cleansing, but before ritual preparation. Obscene by temple rules, but effective. There is no name attached, only a place. A coordinates marker used by ledger carriers who don't trust speech. Behind the arch with cistern echoes. He waits, carries the tablet, what's left of it, to the hollow beneath the writer's shelf. Coats it gently with pigskin treated in ashes. That will slow the bleeding of the rest of the inscription. Then sets it over low flame. Not to burn, but to remember by scent. The vinegar rises, draws out faint lines. Not in letters, but in grooves. The words return, not black, but absent. Gaps like slits preserved into the fold. The sentence is reassembled backward, one gesture at a time. May he be loathed not for what he did, but for how carefully he explained it. The stylus copies it onto a dry sheet of sickle-split pine bark. The grooves are shallow, just enough for the hate to nestle, not flow. The pine won't last long, but that is the purpose. This curse must expire as the target does. No tomb, no urn, just smoke and memory and vinegar-licked edge. He folds the new bark lengthwise, binds it in 3 cloth layers. 1, plain, still wet. 2, char-dusted. 3, threadbare, veined with rust. At the center of the baths, where no patrons linger these years, there is a column cracked just enough to pass a hand through. Behind it, a pit once used to catch incense, ashes long since turned grayer than bone. He places it inside, does not pray, only breathes lightly across the cloth once, enough to lift char dust. Then closes the aperture. The air dampens visibly. When the tablet is gone, he finds the one unburnt item, a tooth. Not human, but shaped suspiciously like an infant's, ridge-worn, glossy, shell-thin. No note. Yet on its curve, a single bent syllable branded not with character, but with spacing, widened until it's no longer language. Just guilt. The next day, the waterways rise. Not from storm. The sky is clear. But every drained stone carries back a trace of vinegar and inkless bile. A sign. Someone received what was erased. And read it, whole. The tablet was never retrieved. Not wholly, at least. By the time the worker's boy found it protruding from the fire pit behind the 3rd cistern arch, a piece of smooth lead wedged between 2 layers of soot stone, the name had already faded. Or more accurately, slipped. Not eroded, not oxidized, not eaten by damp, but shifted across the surface in such a way that the letters, once precise, had begun to echo inward, edge to edge like whispers remembering themselves in the wrong throat. It had been buried no more than a month. And yet, the name, gone. In its place, only a taste remained. He'd pressed his tongue to the metal without knowing why. A habit, perhaps, picked up from watching temple novices test offerings for poison or age. The lead was cool, flat, but its surface held something sharper. Not bitterness, not brine, but something grainy, like ash sifted through burnt bread and steeped in vinegar. He didn't tell anyone. He folded the tablet in cloth, wrapped it 3 times instead of 2, and dropped it down the broken stairwell behind the bathhouse. Then ran home. That was 3 days ago. Since then, he has not spoken aloud. But he hums. The same pattern again and again. No one recognizes the melody, but the sound carries. Through the cracks in the old grain wall. Through the chill hallways where clerks once copied curses without ink. Through the folds of dried linen kept for lining jars. To the chamber below the baths, where the curse writer has removed his stylus and laid it across the skin of his open palm for the last time. He listens, not with ear, but with gesture, breath, familiar stillness. The hum passes overhead, faint, as if the echo itself bore inscription. He does not rise. He does not write. Instead, he retrieves the folded wrapping of the final commission. The cloth bears no stain, but it has weight. The residue of 2 things pressed together for too long, lead and name. Fold and promise. What they called ligatura in the temple, not a curse, not a plea, just joining. A binder's memory. He lays it open beside the brazier. No flame tonight, only gray stone. The air is damp to the tongue, not heavy, not chill. Just quiet in the way places become when no voice has grieved them recently. He sifts the wrapping between his hands. A parchment scrap falls free from the lining. On it, a list. Names, not of people, but of places once used to shelter those bound by writing. Market shade, left of drainage. Behind the marble tomb with unfinished date. Within a cracked amphora left unnamed at burial. The sweatcloth set beneath the hand of the accused. Cut square, not long. He recognizes several. Some are his work, others older. He presses the cloth to his chest, not in reverence, but to test the stillness. There's no flutter, no breath beneath. Then he folds it, gently, into a single hinge crease. The wax candles, they're still sealed. He opens one, applies a slip to the crease. Within the wax now runs a faint dusting of white ash, ground silk thread, and a trace of burnt fig core. Mixed the way dead offerings were prepared when curses began traveling by inkless bark. He closes the cloth, places it in a small amphora, one never anointed, lined not with pitch, but dry fleece, even its twine preserved in vinegar. Moves to the east corner of the chamber, and with his shovel, still soot-etched from the long offering months when no gods answered, he clears 3 layers of old stone bedding, exposing the crooked support beams once used by city masons to level the ground. There's no spectacular ritual, no noise, no scent, only placement, only return. He rests the amphora near the centermost beam, where water collects in late frost, yet never flows to drain. A pocket, not dry enough to preserve, not wet enough to rot, just stable, just quiet. He replaces the earth, does not tamp it, leaves one stone with its edge exposed, not marked, just slightly overturned, in case, later, someone will speak of it. A merchant's child whose illness vanished once a name she never remembered grew too heavy to say. A temple clerk who begins to fold his ledgers backward from end to start. A widow who burns a pair of sandals outside the bath one evening, claiming they walked home by themselves. None will mention the curse writer. Not directly, but in a funeral carving shaped from used chalk stone, placed unevenly along a well ledge outside the city's north border. A series of linked ridges will trace the story of a man who folded paper that was never shown, wrote words that never left the room, and taught those who could not speak how ink might form anyway. The carving bears no name, but beneath it, a script too soft for temple strokes. Just long ripples pressed into the plaster, like someone wrote into the stone using cloth soaked in breath. A pattern known, a repetition half recited, half formed. He preserved what couldn't be buried, not in salt, not in ink, not in dust. And further, and laid names to sleep, only when the fold became lighter than the hand that carried it. Underscore, there are no more names to bind, no stylus waiting beside its cloth, only threads, curled now like dried stems, that once held the corners of grief intact. The tools no longer shimmer, the cloths no longer weep. Their names have been placed where breath no longer rises sharply when remembered, folded once, then again, then laid beside offerings old enough to have forgotten their purpose. In the lowest chamber beneath the baths, the floor has settled, the brazier has cooled, and if the stone still remembers warmth, it does not ask for more. The tablets pressed into soot have begun to fade again, as things must fade, not out of error, but relief. Somewhere down the coast, in a town that doesn't claim a banner, children write names in the dirt that blow away too quickly to be spoken. And that is enough, because history, too, is a kind of sigh, held gently in the mouth before it escapes, leaving only the aftertaste of something we never meant to say. The curse writer unmakes no words. He simply lets the last fold close. Cloth to skin, wax to dust. No record remains. Only the stillness, where the name, once waited to be spoken. If what we uncovered deserves to be remembered, leave a word, and do not forget to like and subscribe. That's how history survives. Have a good night.